Raising a mentally handicapped child in the 1930s and 40s was extremely difficult. Handicapped people were treated like outsiders. They were thought of as burdens to society. Many children with disabilities were placed or removed from their families and were housed in large professional institutions. The living conditions for people with mental disabilities was deplorable. Many times they were treated as if they were not humans at all. They were not taken care of and were usually tied down and not allowed to interact with other people. In the late 1940s, the parent movement began. Many people were displeased and tired of the way mentally handicapped people were treated. As the parent movement began, people began to have hope for the possibility of a more normal life for these children. At the forefront of this movement was Rosemary Dybwad and her husband Gunnar. Rosemary Dybwad was born May 12, 1910 in Howe, Indiana. She was the daughter of missionaries, and during her teenage years she moved to Manila, Philippines. She graduated from the Western College for Women in Oxford, Ohio in 1931. They went to the University of Leipzig in Germany from 1931 to 1933. This is where she would meet Gunnar and later marry him, and move back to the United States. She would go on to attend the University of Indiana School of Social Work for a year, then return to Germany to get her doctorate from the University of Hamburg in 1936. She completed her education at the New York School of Social Work in 1938.
Ask her to relate to us, if you could, how the two of you got involved in the field of developmental disabilities, and if you could recount for us some of the early struggles that brought us where we are today.
Well, it may surprise you, but we came in the back door. We had been involved first in work in prisons. I wrote my dissertation on social work in American women's prisons. This was in a German university, and they knew even less than I knew about it at that time. But it was an exciting thing to be involved in, and eventually we moved to juvenile delinquency, worked in an institution in New York State, and finally Gunnar was executive director of the Child Study Association of America, which was a parent involvement organization, which was excellent training for becoming executive director of the National Association.
When Rosemary first began to take an interest in people with disabilities, she was working in a women's prison. She did not like the living conditions and the way women were treated. This involved her taking a more active role in the lives and living conditions in mental institutions. At this time, people would just send their family members away to these institutions so they weren't a burden to their family.
The living conditions in these institutions were deplorable. Children were often tied to things and treated inhumanely. These children were often not allowed to interact with others and could not ask for help. When the parent movement really began to take place, it began to light the fire in parents across the world. It gave them hope. People became more willing to talk about these disabilities. One person in particular helped progress the movement. This person was John F. Kennedy. His sister Rosemary had a mental handicap and had been placed in a mental institution at a young age. He developed a plan to combat the illness. Laws were passed to enforce the rights, and actions happened to make sure kids and adults with mental disabilities could live and be a part of the environment in the community. Rosemary was truly a trailblazer and would go to great lengths in order to have parents' voices be heard. In a video, Rosemary would recall marching with a banner bigger than herself that said, "Don't think that we don't think," to the gates of an institution with parents of mentally disabled children. She would work tirelessly in order for parents' voices to be heard. Over the years, Rosemary and her husband Gunnar became influential figures in the disability rights movement. When he became the director of the National Association for Children with Mental Disabilities in 1957, Rosemary assisted him, as many parent groups were forming around the world in 1964. Rosemary and her husband became co-directors of an intellectual disability project for the International Union of Child Welfare.
Rosemary published 2 books. The first is an international directory of mental health resources. She also wrote Perspectives on a Parent Movement, The Revolt of Parents of Children with Intellectual Limitations. Rosemary wrote the first book in 1971 and the second book in 1990. Perspectives on a Parent Movement, The Revolt of Parents of Children with Intellectual Limitations talks about parent-to-parent efforts and parent-driven programs, and gives advice on how to deal with the children and how to help them as they transition into adulthood. It speaks against society's habit of seeing children with disabilities as a burden. Rosemary helped change the way other people see children with disabilities. She also gave great advice on how the parents should help their children. The world used to view children with disabilities as useless and treated them unkindly. Rosemary helped change that perspective. She was a great pioneer on the frontier of care and support for those who were mentally disabled.
The brilliance that he showed was that he realized that they could speak for themselves. If given a chance, given an opportunity, they could think and they could really express their own needs.
Today, her efforts have truly made an impact on society. People with disabilities are no longer hidden away. Families are able to advocate for their loved ones and get them the help and education that they deserve. Doctors are more willing to listen and help instead of just shipping them away to live in an institution. These things make it easier for disabled people to live a happy, healthy life. We as a society owe many thanks to people like Rosemary who were willing to forge her own trail in service to others. Rosemary was a pioneer on the frontier of mental disability support, especially for children. It would be hard for most people to dedicate their life to what Rosemary did. Rosemary Dybwad wrote 2 books to help parents. Rosemary worked with lots of children to help with their disabilities and made many people's lives better.